Welcome attendees to today's SCORE webinar. I see people are rolling in and we're a few minutes early. Just wanted to give some launch time for our presenter and myself. We will be starting momentarily. Thanks for joining us today. Again, a quick check-in to today's SCORE webinar. My name is Dave Myers, a SCORE volunteer out of Charlotte, and just happy to have so many folks joining us. I see there's about 20 participants on the list now and continues to grow. We're about a minute or two prior to start time, and we'll be starting momentarily. Thank you. Hello again, folks. Again, thanks for joining us. While we're getting ready to get started, if you would please use the chat function of the Zoom platform to first enter your name, location, and just business name. Secondly, I'll be monitoring as the moderator of this webinar. Any questions that you may have, please send them when you can, and I'll try to monitor those and give those to our presenter. And we'll try to address all the questions that we can. And then lastly, a number of folks had completed the Culture Index survey through the link on the registration page. And we got a number of surveys. And at the end of this presentation, our presenter will read the surveys, personality surveys. So if you would like your survey read, please put your name and please read survey in the chat. We'll have time for about 5 surveys to be read. So please put that in there and do that about 1:15. And I ask that so it doesn't get hung up in the chat. So thanks again for joining today's webinar, Leading Yourself and Your Team Using Behavioral Awareness. Well, that is a subject that is quite close to me. My name is Dave Myers. I've been with SCORE as a volunteer for about 4 years, and I'm happy to moderate today's presentation with John Riddle regarding Culture Index. I can speak from personal experience. My company has been using Culture Index for about 15 years. When we first started, I had a little hesitancy about it. Took it on myself. Had leadership team take it. It just appeared very accurate. And today we have all new hires during their interview process take the interview, and we have all of our 125 employees take it on an annual basis. And it just gives great insight to, do we have the right people in the right seats, and are they working with the right people? John will be addressing that here shortly. Just now, a little bit about SCORE. About small business success starts here, and hopefully everyone that's on there, and we're now up to 34 participants, hopefully everyone out there has engaged previously with SCORE. It's a great platform to help your small business grow. Just showing a few slides, and I'm struggling here, operational difficulty, and we'll, one moment. There we go. About SCORE services. SCORE volunteers are successful and experienced business executives. Free confidential mentoring, one-on-one sessions, video, email, and in person. Actually, I had one myself this morning. Educational programs, webinars, virtual and in person, such as this one, online resources, and then community outreach events, networking pitch event. We every other month we have our big mixer. Had one last week, about 50 or 60 people in attendance. The next one is scheduled for June, and then our annual pitch event, Pitch for Growth, will occur on Thursday, May 28th. There should be newsletters coming out on that. I hope everyone can attend. You will need to register before the event. North Carolina chapters, as you can see, were well represented, and SCORE is a national organization started in 1964, well represented throughout North Carolina. About SCORE funding, as SCORE continues its mission to help small businesses start, grow, and thrive, we want to share an important update. Donations to support our mission to small business owners nationwide will be accepted on our website. This webinar is free, and our district, which is North Carolina, and that includes our chapter out of Charlotte, have made a commitment that none of our webinars will charge a fee. Other districts are unable to make that commitment, but through sponsorships and donations, we are able to offer all of these educational webinars for free, and we are quite proud of that. Now I'd like to go back to this opening slide and just introduce our presenter, John Riddle. John is the founder of Newsboy Consulting, which is a representative for Culture Index, fractional CHRO and leadership advisory firm that works with small and mid-sized organizations to strengthen leadership capacity or capability, improve hiring decisions, and build effective teams. His work focuses on helping business owners develop practical people systems that support growth and reduce organizational friction. John regularly works with leadership teams to apply behavioral frameworks, including Culture Index, to better understand leadership patterns, team dynamics, and role alignment. So a question might be for you, if you're a solopreneur, how is this applicable to me? Understanding your own personality traits and self-image is a starting point. And then you're the first building block, and subsequent building blocks, you can best determine how they blend together. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to our presenter, John Riddle. John, if you could take the screen.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you guys see my screen okay?
I see it.
Okay, awesome. Well, all right. Well, can you guys still see it? Okay, awesome. Well, so first off, thanks for everybody for being here. Kind of showing up is one of the hardest parts about kind of doing all this. And so I want to start out with a statement that may sound a little bit uncomfortable, but I think it's one of the most important things that I tell my new clients when I get started with them is that you're not just building a business, you're building an extension of yourself. And so, much like was said earlier, the business is going to be an extension of a couple of different things. It's going to be an extension of your decision making, your urgency, your communication style, and your tolerance for risk. All of that becomes embedded into how your business operates. Whether or not you intend it or not, you guys are the catalyst of who your business is going to be in the long term. So as businesses scale, success is rarely about who is the smartest, but more often than not, a successful business that's scaling and growing or starting, the biggest factor in success is really self-awareness, knowing kind of where you're starting from. Right. So today, that's really what we're going to do. Now, Culture Index, I was joking around before we jumped on this call. The Culture Index training is about 20 hours worth of training. And so we're gonna boil that down to about an hour, and we're gonna move pretty quick. And so 100% as we go along, if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to be touching a lot of topics very, very quickly. So please use the chat where you guys need it, right? So, but today, it's really all about giving you guys awareness specifically through the framework of Culture Index, so that you can, one, understand how you naturally operate, two, predict where you will struggle, three, hire more intentionally when you guys are ready to hire, and then finally, build a business that doesn't get capped by your blind spots. Because that's the other scary part is that businesses get capped typically because we ignore the things that we maybe aren't that great at. We love to doing the things that we're really good at. We don't like doing the things we're not. And so we talk about me. Obviously, all that was said makes me feel a lot more important than I feel like I really am. But I've been in the people space for about 20 years working with startups, small to medium-sized businesses, helping them get started, grow, scale, really kind of help them start out on the right foot as it comes to like organizational design. So, and really what we're going to talk about today, like what I want you guys to not think is that this is some type of theory that may work or may not work. I work with companies with 5 employees, 20 employees, 0 employees, or I guess 1 employee, hundreds of employees. I work with companies that haven't hired their first person. I work with companies they're looking to hire their 100th person. And the consistent pattern I've seen is that most owners don't struggle because they have a lack of intelligence. They struggle because they don't understand truly how they operate. They don't understand how the people around them operate and what are the differences in those and where can we use that for alignment versus where is that going to come across as fiction, right? So I want to talk very quickly about behavioral analytics, which is kind of the core of what Culture Index is. If you look on the right side of the screen, that's what a Culture Index graph looks like, at least part of it. But really, when we talk about behavioral analytics, what we do is we try and bring to light the things that are more intrinsic, right? So we analyze um, performance, what employees do, what is overall good for their well-being, and we use that analyzing of that data to try and predict future outcomes, right? So we use data science, which is just collecting that data. We use the behavioral side, which is more the psychology side, and we kind of combine those two things together, and we do that to improve performance, improve hiring, improve leadership, and also just improve the employees' well-being, right? Because nobody wants to do a job that they hate. Um, we want to have everybody kind of in that sweet spot where they're going to do their best, right? So So using behavioral awareness at the start of the business. So really kind of why are we doing all this? Isn't it just easier just to kind of let things go and let things run, especially at the very beginning where there's so much fluctuation and kind of uncertainty? Isn't it easier just to let things go, right? So I would argue that at the very, very beginning is when it's most important, right? So at the earliest stages, culture index and behavior analytics or behavioral awareness helps you to one, understand your natural leadership tendencies. What are your sweet spots? What are you good at? What are the things that you just wake up in the morning ready to do? It also lets you know, hey, when the pressure hits, how do you react, right? Do you tend to step in and take control? Do you collaborate or gather more information? Do you move quicker or slower when the stress hits? Also, like what is your tolerance for risk? And on the flip side of that, what is your tolerance for structure and pace, right? Most small business owners or people that are starting small businesses, we tend to be a little bit on the risky side. We like some risk. Some of us started our companies because we didn't want structure. We enjoyed the idea of kind of starting our own thing. Typically, most of us tend to be fast paced, but that's not always the case, right? And then last thing is to anticipate how you operate when demands intensify. So when things are easy, that's great. We're going to react in a certain way. When things get much harder, what happens when push comes to shove? So again, just kind of how do you naturally operate under pressure, taking control? Do you move fast or slow? For some people, when stress or pressure hits, we become laser focused. For some other ones, when stress hits, we kind of take more of a broader perspective, right? So that tends to either make us move quicker or slows us down a little bit. When pressure comes, do we prioritize flexibility? Or are we wanting more of a checklist idea of like, all right, pressure hits, I need to do these things right here? And then when pressure hits, do we tend to communicate broadly or do we tend to be more direct with our communication, right? So these are all things, these aren't solely it, but these are all things that we gather through Culture Index and more broadly in the behavior analytics side. So when we talk about kind of the four foundations or four core behavioral drives that Culture Index looks at, technically there's seven, but for the sake of time, we're gonna function on the four here. So those are autonomy, which think of it as are you more of a driver? Or are you more on the support side? Or are you more strategic versus more tactical? The next one is sociability. The easiest way to think about this is are you more introverted? Are you more extroverted? Do you get your energy from being alone? Or do you get your energy from people? Another aspect of sociability that we don't tend to think about a lot is deductive versus inductive. Do we think through things from a general to specific, or do we think things from specific to general? Um, the next one is patience. So with patience, do we tend to be more methodical or do we tend to be more adaptable? Do we tend to be more patient or do we tend to like more pressure? And then we have conformity. So conformity is, do we like the rules? Do we play by the rules or do we see rules more as opinions or guidelines? And then also, do we tend to be more, hey, what has worked historically? Let's keep doing that, which is kind of the tried and true side. Or are we more of the out of the box thinker, right? Hey, like, okay, one plus one is two, but is it two always? Are there instances where one plus one is not two, right? So these four kind of core behavioral drives really make up who we are kind of at our core. Now, we may have multiples of these. Um, on different sides, right? We may have some that are more drive patterns and some that are more support patterns, and we'll get to that once we start reading some profiles. But the biggest thing to understand coming out of this is understanding what is your pattern because not everybody has the same, right? I'll go through here in a second, kind of what are the typical patterns that you see for an entrepreneur or somebody starting out, but that's not everybody. And with that, also there's kind of pitfalls for any pattern, right? If it gets too much in one way, these kind of strengths can become some hindrances, which I talk about in a couple of slides. So when we talk about kind of what are the typical strengths that are typical strengths that drive early growth in an organization, tend to be high autonomy, which tend to drive action, ownership, forward movement. When you're first starting, it is that kind of grit of like, okay, like I've had a lot of failures, I'm going to keep going, and I'm not going to give up. So that's one of them we see. The other one is more high sociability. So this is where, especially if it's something that's having to be sold, right? We need somebody with a high sociability to be out there building relationships, selling the vision that the visionary has within the organization. And typically, high sociability people tend to create energy, right? They tend to be the one, if we have a high sociability pattern, they have, contacts that are, their contact list in their phone is a mile long. They don't even know where the contacts came from. They're part of multiple organizations and they just naturally connect people together. The next trait that we tend to see is low patience, which can also be called high pace, which low patience, high pace enables adaptability and fast responsiveness, right? At the very beginning, typically there's not a lot of systems, right? And so there needs to be a lot of adaptability that happens for organizations to be able to get past that kind of first phase of, okay, we started something, we're trying to figure it out, but we still have to make a living. So we have to be highly adaptable, which then bleeds into the last one, which is low conformity, right? Low conformity allows a lot of flexibility and also a lot of out of the box thinking, which tends to be really beneficial when you're starting something up. And a lot of the things that you think are going to happen may not happen. And sometimes some things that you don't think are going to happen do happen. So there has to be that level of flexibility. But the thing to remember is that those things, especially in the early stages, those things that can be seen as strengths, at the mid stage may turn into friction, right? If you have somebody who is high sociability, high pace, but maybe not a lot of systems. So when we start getting into that mid stage of an organization, that's when we start to see that friction, right? Where it's like, okay, like we're kind of out of this phase where it's kind of in the wild, wild west where anything goes. Now we're needing to start building some systems in that original strength of adaptability now starts to cause some issues when we start to like really lay down SOPs and functions. And then at the scale stage, you'll start to see that strength become a bottleneck, where if we haven't filled the gaps within the organization, or if we haven't realized what our own internal gaps are, then there starts to be bottlenecks on decision making, bottlenecks on movement. If the organization needs more processes, okay, now we have a bottleneck because we don't have somebody that necessarily wants to build it. So just some signs to watch out for. On the high autonomy side, in one sense, it's great. On the next sense, it that broad vision can sometimes miss the intricate details that needs to happen along with that. High autonomy tend to be risk takers, which again at the very beginning is great, but something to be on the lookout for just in case further down it may not be the right time to take a risk, or most of you know this that when you're first starting out risk can be high wins or high losses, right? There's a big risk reward in that. And then also high autonomy tends to seek out less input from others, right? It's in the name auto autonomy, which is self, right? Highly autonomous people tend to be very um, kind of inward focused, where they they don't look from a lot for a lot of input around the people around them, right? So then we move into the high sociability. Some signs to watch out for are going to be overpromising and lack of follow through on commitments, right? So everybody knows a really, really good salesperson. Really, really good salespeople tend to be high social abilities, and what they tend to do is promise the world, and then we got to figure out how we're going to get there. And so that is something just to be on the lookout for. Like, are we overpromising too much? And then on the operations side of things, and we're not able to fulfill those quotas or fulfill those tasks or needs or whatever may be coming up. When we talk about low patience, high pace, we're really talking about constant change and lack of consistency, right? Low patience, high pace tend to be multitaskers, tend to thrive under pressure, tend to get bored really, really easy, right? So those of us, and I'm one of those, we tend to like a lot of change. And at the very beginning, that's really good. But then once we've built some strategy and structure, that constant change can make our clients, our peers, our employees a little change tiresome, right? They start to get tired of the constant change and they need predictability, which again goes into low conformity, right? We're missing systems and missed details, and then we have operational gaps. So the whole point of that was really just to show, these previous traits, while they may be typical strengths, they can also have kind of an opposite side of that where we just need to be on the lookout for those things. So, want to see any questions so far. I know I'm going pretty quickly, but any questions in the chat or anything that you guys would like to discuss before we move into the next stage?
John, I have to say, this is just some great information. And this information, when I first started 10 or 15 years ago using these surveys, you know, myself and employees, we were concerned about it being right and wrong or good or bad. And, it took us, myself included, a while to understand it's none of that. It's just facts, and facts is knowledge, and knowledge is power to make better decisions. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The whole point of kind of behavioral analytics and culture index is really to find kind of right person, right seat, right? So we know certain roles really need certain attributes, right? So if it's high autonomy, high sociability, whatever it may be, and what we really want to do is find the perfect person for that role because we don't, if we put somebody into a sales role and they're naturally pretty introverted and don't like talking with people, like it's not fair to that person to put them into that sales role. And so one, it helps us go in and find the right people, right? If we're on the hiring side and we're looking for a salesperson, okay, there's certain attributes we know that we need in sales. And so it helps us find the right person that we know is going to be successful. And that's where it kind of plays in on the hiring side. When it plays in on the like internal employee side, is it helps us know like what are the projects where we can do the best. Like great perfect example is this. COVID was I can't believe COVID was 6 years ago, but it was 6 years ago. And a lot of my clients, when things started to shut down, they really started to figure out what were they going to do. And what we did was we brought in one of my companies. We brought in everybody in the company that had a high autonomy and a low conformity. Because what we were looking for is people that are going to be thinking outside the box. Because we hadn't gone through a pandemic before, we'd never had to shut down before, and so historical knowledge, which is what conformity pulls off of, wasn't going to help because we couldn't do that anymore. So we were able to kind of get a group of employees of like-minded ways of thinking to get them together to solve a problem. And every organization eventually should have most patterns because we want well organized, well planned out organizations where not everybody is high autonomy. We need people that not only can lead, but we also need people to support that. And so that's where Culture Next really comes in, is making sure that we have the right people who have a seat at the table to make the decisions and do the things that are going to be most impactful. Because what we found is when people are in those right spots, they enjoy coming to work. They enjoy feeling like there's something bigger than what they are and being able to give ideas and impact to the organization that maybe they wouldn't have normally been able to without knowing kind of what those key superpowers are. Because that's really what we do within Cultrinix is we look for superpowers. Did that answer your question?
John, that was great. It was spot on. I don't see any additional questions in
Okay.
the chat right now or in the Q&A, so let's continue.
Okay, awesome. So kind of brings me to my point here, which is no pattern is better. And you guys will hear me when we start reading patterns later, you'll hear me say things like high or low or under or over or whatever. Like that doesn't matter. Well, not you're high or low on this, that, or the other. What we're looking for is kind of misalignment and alignment, right? So misalignment obviously creates friction and tension and it kind of wasted energy. And then alignment creates flow, right? And when you're first starting out a business, flow is going to be everything. Knowing what your strengths are, knowing where those areas are that you naturally bring your superpower to the table, and then also knowing, hey, like here's some areas where I know my first hire or my second hire, or maybe my third hire, these are the areas that I'm going to need to hire because these are my gaps. These are the things I need to work on. So want to go through kind of each one, the four main cores, go through highs and lows on those very quickly, just to kind of give you guys an understanding of kind of what each means. So when we talk about understanding high and low autonomy, so high autonomy leaders tend to be very decisive and competitive, tend to be very independent, can appear forceful to others. That's not their intention, but they tend to be very driven. So some developmental focuses for high A's or high autonomy people. Um, high, and I am a high autonomy person. I tend to talk more than I listen, and so I consciously have to say, okay, I need to listen for a second before I give direction, or I need to listen for a second before I make an action. I need to clarify expectations, because sometimes when I'm thinking a year down the road and I'm talking with somebody who's trying to do something in the next week, that gap between kind of a week and a year may be a lot, right? So this is where I need to clarify those expectations clearly and avoid overpowering quieter voices, right? So this is when you've got somebody that's more on the support side, making sure that you pause and let other people talk. High A's tend to be very driven. They tend to kind of plow through roadblocks, and we need those support voices out there to tell us like, hey, this is a good idea or this is not a good idea. On the other side, the low A leaders or low autonomy leaders tend to be highly collaborative and supportive, right? They tend to bring a lot of harmony to the workplace. They tend to want to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table, everybody has a voice, everybody has the ability to bring value and impact to the organization. So some developmental focuses for high autonomy. So build decisiveness into key moments. So support characteristics tend to kind of wait for a second and kind of see what's going on. And sometimes they can miss kind of key decisive moments. Setting clear authority boundaries, and then owning outcomes with confidence. Um, More of that being having a clear, defined out idea of kind of where the finish line is and making sure we get there. Um, this is just a case study I want to do really quickly. So just to kind of give you guys an idea. Um, so the survey on the right is me, and the survey on the left is one of my consultants that works for me. And obviously, you guys can see these two patterns are almost exactly opposite. And so that red dot you see is that autonomy drive we were talking about. So for me, I'm all risk, I'm all drive, I'm all gas pedal, right? The red dot is your gas, the green dot's your brake. I am all gas all the time. So my first hire that I hired when I started my company was this facilitator right here. And her pattern is exact opposite. Her pattern is 100% breaks, to make sure that the company I'm trying to build 18 months down the road is going to be there next week or the week after that, to make sure we made payroll, to make sure that I'm not doing something that's going to get us sued, right? That's her job. And what I knew when I first started is that those are not my strengths. And so I need to find somebody to be able to do that. And that's where when we talk about, a lot of owners, founders think that, okay, I'll worry about culture when I hire my first employer, when we get to 5 employees or 10 employees or whatever. No, it's got to start at the very beginning, because if it doesn't, you're going to surround yourself with a bunch of people who have the same gaps as you do. And then something's going to come along where we're going to need to fill that gap, and we're going to be waiting and we're going to be wanting. So when we talk about sociability, so understanding high and low sociability people. So high B leaders, high sociability leaders, energizing, vision oriented, strong communicators. May overpromise, right? This is where we get into that kind of sales mentality of things. May overpromise, especially if they're excited, if they feel like they're getting ready to get a sale, or if they're getting ready to persuade somebody to think kind of the way they do. They're very quick to say, okay, uh, yeah, I need to hold off, or I'm going to keep going, right? So developmental focus for high Bs tends to be follow through on commitments, right? Making sure that we're taking note of all the things we're saying that we're going to do, and so we don't miss something, because our low Bs are writing everything down. We're keeping track of everything that's going on, right? So again, create written clarity on expectations, because high Bs tend to think out loud. They tend to problem solve out loud. And so making sure that there's written clarity on expectations is great. And then separating enthusiasm from promises. Don't get caught up in the adrenaline rush or dopamine rush of like having a great conversation or selling somebody on something and promising something that you're not going to be able to deliver, right? So the flip side of that, on the low B side or low sociability side, low Bs tend to be very reserved, direct, very task oriented. They're professionally social. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are antisocial or introverted. It means they're professionally social. If it takes 5 words to communicate it, they're going to give you 5 words. They're not going to give you 20 like the high B leaders. They're going to give you exactly five. On the developmental focus side, um, so one thing that helps is for the low Bs, just increase the visibility with the team. Typically, low Bs like quiet and kind of focused work, but occasionally getting them involved with other people just to make sure that everybody knows kind of where they're, what page they're on. Try and provide relational connections where they want it. Don't force them. Hey, if you know if you've got a very introverted person, don't force them to go to a dinner or something like that. And then soften and clarify tones and messages, because typically low Bs, our communication is very direct, right? Very bullet pointed, nouns, verbs. We may need to soften and clarify tones and messages a little bit to make sure that the people that aren't low Bs are able to communicate with us. So this is a perfect example of a high B communicator. This is a rainmaker. So if you can notice the yellow dot, which is the B dot, it's 3.5 above the red arrow, right? So this is person that is all relationships. This is person that is all social. Um, they are very inductive in the way they think, right? So they're always kind of looking around, gauging from the environment, things that are going on, and they are constantly adapting to that environment, right? So that's why we get that kind of inductive way of thinking. So again, rainmakers make great salespeople, but you got to be careful that they don't overpromise the world to make sure that help them get a sale. So the next one is understanding kind of the C pattern or your patient's pattern, understanding high and low patients. So high Cs, high patients, you guys are consistent, stable, process driven, tend to be very checklist oriented. So my wife is a high C. I'm a very, very low C, which makes our marriage interesting at times. But my wife will have checklists to make sure that she fills that checklist. And she will create a checklist just to check everything off real quickly to let her know she did something because she gets enjoyment out of that repetition and consistency in her day, right? She likes predictability. The development focus on that is building adaptability to evolve to conditions, right? So as we're talking about new businesses, things that are just getting ready to get started, yeah, if you're naturally a high C person, you're going to need to adapt that a little bit, at least at the very beginning. Now, later on, when we get to kind of mid and scale phase, that process and patience side of things is going to be amazing. At the very beginning, we're going to have to flex that a little bit to make sure that we can adapt and kind of meet the needs that are constantly changing in that kind of an initial kind of rise phase. And then actively encourage innovation and new approaches, right? So actively encourage a little bit of adaptability, where, hey, like this may be something we've never done before. So let's try and build out a process. And if it works, we can then bring that in and have that be an SOP to make it more predictable. When we talk about low C leaders, tend to be fast-paced, change-oriented, right? These are to a degree, these are our kind of our chaos agents. I'm one of these where we like to multitask. We like a certain amount of pressure. We're not procrastinators, but we like pressure to get things done. Pressure helps us hone in and really kind of drive into kind of what we need to be doing. Um, Again, thrive in urgency and ambiguity. We like the gray. We like ambiguity. We like for things to be unpredictable because it brings excitement. So developmental focus, as we move from kind of the start phase to more of a mid or scale phase, get them more comfortable with predictability and help them not get bored with that predictability. And that's a challenge, right? That's my challenge daily is the things that I have to do every day that are very predictable. How do I make sure they don't become boring or they don't become something that I dread, right? Because those small predictable things are really what drives the growth within an organization after it gets out of that kind of first starting phase. And then also just the developmental focus is avoiding constant priority shifts, right? This is something that is notorious for low Cs. We kind of run after emergencies, we run after fires, and that causes us, especially if we're in a leadership role, that causes the organization to then focus on those things. So helping understand that, knowing that not everybody likes to run after fires, crisis intervention, stuff like that, bringing in some of that predictability helps the organization continue to grow. And so here's a low C chaos agent. So I actually talked with him right before this class. And so the C, if you look at the blue dot, the C is 4.25 to the left, right? So this person is very, very far on the end of constant needs of pressure, likes to multitask, needs excitement to keep things going, wants little to no predictability in his organization, right? In some phases, that's good, but in other things, it drives the people around him a little crazy. And so that's just something to be aware of. So, all right, lastly, we talk about conformity, which is, conformity is how much do we feel like we have to play by the rules to be able to be successful. So when we talk about our high D leaders tend to be very detail focused, very structured, tend to have a high attention to detail, very quality driven. Um, may overreact and micromanage others because with high D leaders, if it's 99% correct, it's 100% wrong, right? For high D leaders, accuracy, efficiency, and data correctness is 100% what drives them. And so what you'll see with high Ds is sometimes they'll struggle with delegating, right? So if you're a high D leader and you feel yourself struggling to delegate, the reason is because you have such a high perception of correctness that you're worried if you give it to somebody else, they may not do it as well. And then your name is on that project or your name is on that data set, whatever it may be. So then that makes you look bad, right? So just know if you're a high D and you struggle with delegation, that may be what's focusing or what may be prompting that, right? So some developmental focuses for high Ds or high conformities, um, resist perfectionism at scale, right? Very rarely does any company I work with get more than 70% of it right out the gates. And if they get 70% correct, like they're doing pretty good. I would ask if they're cheating or if they started another business previously, because so much of it is trial by fire, learning as we go. So really, at least at the initial startup phase, resist a lot of that perfectionism because it's going to slow you down. Now it will help later. So I'm telling you not to get rid of it, but just know at the very beginning it's going to be very hard. And then empowering others to operate differently, right? If you've hired your first, second, maybe even third employee, and they operate very differently than you, but the same outcome is happening, just be careful of that, right? If you think you're right, your way is 100% right all the time, that's usually a pretty quick gut check of saying, okay, maybe I need to take a step back, and is there a better way or even just a different way of doing something? So now we'll kind of go into low D leaders. Low D leaders, out of the box thinkers, tend to be very flexible, tend to be rule adverse. It doesn't necessarily mean that we hate rules, and I say we because I'm a low D. Doesn't mean that we hate rules, but we will bend a rule to get what we need to get going. So we're very comfortable kind of living in that gray area. So we may miss critical details though. So low Ds tend to be also pretty have a high appetite for risk. And so we need the high Ds by our side, letting us know, hey, if we make this pretty risky decision, here's going to be the risk that may be attached to that. Um, and then some developmental focuses for low Ds, define clear standards for the team, right? If it was up to low Ds, like we would just stay in the kind of ambiguous gray areas all the time. But we need that definition, especially once we get out of that initial start phase. We need SOPs, we need processes to be able to scale off of. And then which brings me to the next one, which is building repeatable systems before scaling, right? You have to have those in place or in essence, you're scaling into 5 different companies, right? Because you don't have a set system to be able to build your company into. Um, so I want to pause really quickly. I know that was very quick high overview of the 4 kind of core traits, but any questions or any comments before we kind of move into kind of why this even matters before we start hiring?
Again, John, this is just some great information, and because I've embraced it for the last 10 or 15 years, I enjoy sitting through this presentation, and I've gone through the 16-hour training along with probably 10 other folks here. It's just quite interesting and important. I don't see any questions that are surfacing right now, but let's continue. One quick note to everybody on the line, and I'll put this in the chat as well. this presentation will be distributed to all attendees within a week after the presentation. So if someone has that question, and please also keep in mind, if you'd like your survey read, if you would just put it in the chat within the next 15 minutes or so. Thank you, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, please ask questions. It may sound like it, but I actually hate hearing myself talk. So please put in questions if you guys have them. I don't want anybody to feel like, they leave this presentation and maybe miss a question or something like that. So, so I want to talk through kind of why does this matter before we even hire, right? So most entrepreneurs wait until they have a team to think about people, but that's really too late, right? So your behavioral patterns, what you naturally are going to shape your business before your first hire. And that's so important when we think about the strengths that that business is going to have, right? So if you are naturally somebody that's very decisive, high autonomy, those are going to be natural kind of patterns that are going to be within your business, right? So your strengths are going to accelerate your growth, and your blind spots create early constraints, right? So if there's one thing I want you guys to get out of me talking for an hour, is this sentence right here. Your strengths accelerate early growth. Your blind spots create early constraints, right? So that's what I want you guys to realize is that this is why behavior analytics and culture index is so important, right? Because they're blind spots for a reason, because we don't know they're there. We don't know we have these blind spots. And so that's why it's so crucial to do this now. Like, you guys are in the perfect seat right now to go ahead and start this. Because if you don't, it's going to be much harder once you've got 5, 10, 15, 20 employees that are under your care. And now we need to reassess, what are the core visions? What is the mission? What are the values of the company? How do we assess what are our strengths? When we do our SWOT analysis, right? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities and what are our threats? Those top two typically come from, at least in the initial couple of years, the owner's strengths and the owner's opportunities and the things that they don't, are weaknesses, and the things that they don't even know they have, right? So that's why it's so important. Behavioral awareness, behavioral analytics, culture index is most valuable at the concept and launch stage of your company. So I just want to bring this up. So this is one of my clients. When we talk about kind of mirror hiring and why it's so important. So I started with this client about a year ago. They had gone from about 3 employees to about, I think they were at 10 or 12 by the time I started with them. And they had a really hard time understanding why. They had a lot of really, really great ideas, but there was a lot of friction and why they couldn't get things going. So this one on the far left is the owner, and the middle and the one on the right are his first two hires. They are almost identical to each other. The L and I at the bottom, which we're not going to go over in this particular class, but the patterns are almost identical, and since they're all tech experts, they all thrive off information and have high autonomy. But there's something else I want you guys to notice, which goes into a little bit deeper of behavior analytics, but I think it's good to talk about, which is AD conflict. So when you look at those graphs, the red dot is going to be your gas pedal, and the green dot is going to be your brake pedal. So with all three of these individuals, they have what's called AD conflict, which means if you're in a car and you slam your feet on the gas and brakes at the same time, the car tends to kind of shudder and stop and start. That's what you see when you have a group of individuals that have AD conflict. And that tends to be something that we want to talk about. Like, what is when somebody does have an AD conflict where their drive is equal to their caution, what is that magic thing that's going to help them either make a decision or pause, right? Instead of kind of stopping and stuttering and not knowing, how do we know if we need to take the risk or not take the risk? Right. So that's why it's important. If you are a leader with AD conflict, it's not the end of the world, but then you need to surround yourself with people that some of them are going to be more risk oriented, and then some of them are going to be more predictable and safety oriented, because they're going to give you a more full encompass picture of what needs to happen, right? Because these three leaders right here, when we would sit in like leadership meetings, At the very beginning, it was very frustrating because they would be like, "Hey, let's go, let's go. Wait, 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 wait. What about this? Well, no, no, we need to do this. We need to do this. Whoa, whoa, wait, wait. What if this happens?" And then they would start to play off each other. And then, and we never got a lot of momentum until we started kind of filling the gaps of the organization with people that are a little bit more risk inclined and a little bit more caution or risk adverse. And so that's when we talk about AD conflict, that's one of the biggest killers of startups and organizations that are just getting started is that if you have an AD conflict, it's okay. But knowing who you need to bring in as that second person is going to be huge. And that's going to be, hey, does that second person need to be all risk because I need somebody to kind of grow this? Or is it somebody that needs to be more risk averse because, hey, like we're growing too quick or we're getting into an area that's kind of scary and we need to have a little bit more caution. Um, so just want to go through some practical applications at launch stage. And this is kind of at the very beginning where if it's just you, that's totally fine. And honestly, if it's just you, that may be kind of the best place to start because the first thing you need to do is assess those tendencies, right? Assess what are the things that when push comes to shove, like if pressure hits, what are the things that you naturally go to? We all have them, right? I think of it as like a toolbox with a bunch of tools in it. Some of those tools are old and worn down because they're the ones we naturally grab. Like it's the thing that we feel most comfortable doing. And then there's some tools in that toolbox that still have a wrapper on it and never been used because it's just not what we do. It's not what we're used to, right? So knowing what the tools are we naturally use that we're very, very comfortable with, also spotting blind spots. What are those things that we don't do often that may be uncomfortable for us or may not be in our natural skill wheelhouse or just naturally drain energy and power from us? And then how do we define support for that? Which is kind of the third one, right? So if we know, great example. A lot of founders are not great at the financial side, right? We've got this vision of what we want to do. We've got this drive. We've got all this energy and passion and then the numbers part is where we struggle. It's like, oh, like how do I know if I'm profitable? How do I know if I can hire somebody? How do I know if I can do this, that, or the other? So that's where you define support. Hey, I know support wise, I need somebody in my finance department. I need somebody that's got a high attention to detail because I don't. Right. So then you bring that person in that fills in the gaps and complements the leader instead of it being friction. Now it's complementing instead of conflict. But go into it knowing that you're going to have to anticipate some conflict. There's going to be times where if we go back to these individuals right here, where if you hire a high risk person to come in, there's going to be conflict there if that high risk person is always trying to push the envelope and always wants to move forward faster. And that conflict is going to be this person saying, whoa, whoa, wait, what about X, Y, and Z? What about A, B, and C? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? That's where you need to anticipate that conflict and know going into it that it's not a conflict role, it's a complement role, right? This is the person that's helping me grow and helping me fill these gaps where maybe initially it may be uncomfortable, but ultimately it's there to help and sustain and grow the company. So when we talk about kind of using behavioral awareness and hiring, just some things to think about, pace wise, what pace does this role require, right? If there's somebody in finance, typically it's going to be a higher patience, more methodical, right? You want to make sure your end of months close correctly. You want to make sure things are being done in a organized, systematic way. If you're hiring somebody on the sales side, you probably want lower pace, right? You really want somebody that's out there that's going to be kicking tires, knocking on doors, shaking hands, selling. How much autonomy does this role need? Does this person need to kind of think for themselves and create their own goals? Or are these kind of goals and criteria going to be really given to them? And one's not better than the other. It's just two different roles. You've got to have a visionary, which tends to be the high autonomy person, and you have to have an implementer. And I would honestly say implementers are probably a harder role because they have to listen to the visionary and all the 30,000 foot elevation things we say, and then bring that into the implementation phase. So don't always think high autonomy is great because there are times when you need somebody that's going to go in and actually do what needs to be done, right? So how much independence does your role need? We talk about conformity. How much process and precision does the work demand, right? How much by the rules do we need to have it? How much, what is the scale of error that we can have, right? If we're in a bio or science related field, high conformity, right? If we're in a highly litigious field, litigation, high conformity, right? Last thing we want to do is go out there and get sued, right? Because that's the number one thing that closes businesses is being sued. And then last one, sociability. How much outward influence or selling does it require, right? Is this person really going to be kind of in an office by themselves working and that's totally okay? Or are they going to be out there needing to engage and talk to people, which is going to be good for like a sales role or something like that? So we need to gauge what are these things that we need for each role, and then how do we find the right role to be able to fill that, right? And so just want to talk through some complement versus conflict in early team building, some complementary patterns. You're looking for patterns that fill your natural gaps, that stabilize operations and execution, improve consistency across the team, right? Some conflicting patterns, if they're left unmanaged, can generate some frustration, can slow down communication because we're communicating at different levels. If you've got somebody who thrives off bullet points and we've got somebody who writes, novels of emails, okay, like that's slowing things down, right? And that leads to misalignment and then misaligned expectations over time, right? And that expectation piece is where you start to see a lot of friction and frustration. So, just kind of encompasses kind of what we've already talked about. So, your first two hires, or even your first hire, you need to go through it knowing what your strengths are, name your gaps. Like I have a sheet of paper. Well, actually, it's a fake sheet of paper. It's not remarkable. But on there, I've got my strengths, I've got my gaps, and I have the things that drain me. And then I know in the next three hires that I have to hire, what are the patterns that I need for those to be able to fill those gaps and basically offload a lot of those things that drain you. Because I'm sure as you guys as business owners or soon to be business owners, there's aspects of this entrepreneurial life that drain us, right? I've never met anybody who gets energy from every aspect of entrepreneurship. It is tough, right? Entrepreneurship is one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life. But it's a lot easier when I can offload those things that naturally drain me and keep me in that sweet spot, right? Because I want to hire for balance. I want to hire roles that complement me, not mirror me, because this is going to be a bunch of Johns. We're all going to be moving really quickly. We're all going to forget a bunch of stuff, and we're not going to talk to anybody because that's my pattern in a nutshell. So when we're talking about building that first team, really have a plan. And it's going to be easy to shop hungry that first time because you're going to be stressed. You're going to know your gaps, and you're going to be like, I'm the first person that comes in my door, I'm going to hire them. I just need a body. You don't just need a body. You need a person that's going to fill those gaps that you have. And so, kind of last slide for me is this working on versus in the business. This is the biggest trap I see for starting businesses or even once they get to kind of that midpoint. And then at times you'll see it crank back up during the scaling process of it. But if you don't have the right people in the business, you're never going to have time to work on the business because the whole point is to surround yourself with people who can do the things that will allow you to take a step back and do the things that you want to do by working on it, right? So don't it's not that you're delegating. Sorry, the issue is that we don't delegate the complementary patterns. We feel like we have to own everything because we're the owner, we're the founder, we know things better than everybody else. But we may have or need to bring in somebody who has a perfect pattern that's going to take away all those annoyances, right? It is fairly common for owners, founders to hire people that are very similar to themselves. We call that bias in the hiring or in the recruiting world. Even if you're not an owner, you still do it. We naturally gravitate towards people that are like us. And so when we talk about that, that's why going in with having a plan of who we need to hire, what gaps do we need to fill, benefits, right? And that's how we don't avoid that structural discipline, right? So we need to step into it. Those of us that are low Ds, I know structural discipline makes you feel a little weird if you don't like conformity, but in the hiring place, when we're talking about organizational design and organizational development, you have to have a plan. Or as Zig Ziglar says, those who aim at nothing hit it every time. So, um, really, key takeaways. You don't just want to build a business. You do not build a business separate from yourself. You guys are going to be the catalyst of what makes your business who you are. Your behavior shapes your systems. your tendencies shape your team, and your blind spots shape your risk. So, that would be one of my biggest takeaways for you guys is your blind spots shape your risk because we all love doing what we love doing, right? If we love selling, send us out there selling all day, it's great. If we if we hate operations and systems, that's our blind spot and that's going to incur a lot of risk. So any questions, we're almost right on time, but I wanted to see if anybody had any questions about anything that was covered before we start dipping into surveys, if anybody does want their survey read.
Yeah, John, again, great information shared, and there are a number of questions before we get into the surveys. First, to everyone, there's some chat and Q&A questions. Where's the link to the survey? So it was on the registration page. It was put in the chat early on, and then I put it in the chat about 5 or 10 minutes ago. But those links will be to take the survey now. We cannot read them online. It just doesn't process that quick. So a question, John, was, will the results of the individual survey be sent to them? And
Yeah, so yeah, once you
if
guys
you
take
speak
it,
to that.
yeah. Once you guys take it, it'll drop into my system. And then I can forward them over to you guys once they drop into my system. So yes, I did send them out to a group earlier today, the ones that had taken it probably by last night. I had sent them out, so it may have gone to y'all spam if you guys did take it. And it'll say like Culture Index survey results or something like that. If you took it and you didn't get a result, your responses came back avoidant, and that's not as bad as it sounds. What it means is you didn't pick enough words for us to get, oh, well, two things happen. One, you either didn't pick enough words for us to get a full data set, or it timed out. The survey just timed out, or you moved over to one and then tried to swipe back to the previous survey, which will cause an issue with it. So if you guys are going to take it, give yourself 7 to 10 minutes. That's all it takes. Choose on the first one, choose as many words as you feel like relates to you, hit next, and then choose as many words that you feel like relates to you being successful at your job, and then hit submit. And then usually within 5, 10, 15 minutes, I'll usually get the survey and then I can forward them over to you guys as they come in. And you guys can also scan this QR code on the screen right now, which will also take you to it.
So a small question and then a big one, John, then we can move to surveys. The smaller question, is there a key, legend, i.e. key, is there a key to the graphs, A through I, color, etc.?
Yeah, I will
Can
send it.
you?
Yeah, I'll send it out to you guys as well. Well, I'll send it to you, and then you can send it out to the group. There is a key that kind of gives you an idea of what all the different letters are.
Okay, good. And then the last one, which I think is quite important, I will have to say I made note, or you're lucky or good selecting your first employee polar opposite from you. That was almost uncanny. But I
Yeah,
was going to ask you to mention something about the C job,
yeah.
which is really 102 or 103. But the question that came is, how do you incorporate the culture index into the interview hiring process? How does this compare to other personality behavior tests like DISC, Meyer-Briggs, etc.?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I'll hit the first one, which is how does it kind of play into the hiring and also the internal team, right? So I'll kind of break that up into two. On the hiring side, so let's say a company wants to, and I'll use sales just because it's the easiest one to do. Say we need to hire a salesperson for the automotive industry, right? So what Culture Next does, we have something called a C job, which is a survey that you send to, if you already have somebody in the company that's doing it really well, you send it to them, but you also send it to anyone who's going to have input around this role. And so every person that that survey goes to, they take it. And then based off of that, we get the results of what they feel like the typified pattern needs to be for that role. And then we use that as so the survey you guys took was just a general survey. It wasn't attached to any particular role. If we were doing it within a company, it would be attached to a role. And then when you were going in and hiring that person, you would see a percentage match from their survey to the survey that comes up for the job. And so, if it was a, let's say, door-to-door salesperson, right, they need to be outgoing, they need to have drive, they need to move pretty quickly, right? So if somebody applied and they were introverted, more methodical, and really, really love data, yeah, like they would be a lower percentage match to that role. And so I can go in and see, okay, I've had, one of my clients, we put out a role, they had 700 people apply for this role. And we were able to drill it down to 8 interviews because those 8 interviews were over a 90% match to the role. And so that's how we use it on the hiring side. On the internal side, what we do is we meet with every employee every 6 months and go through their results because every employee takes it every 6 months. And what we're looking for is underutilization, right? Are they bored? Or are they overstressed, where we're asking them to do things that they don't like doing? And if that's the case, then okay, let's sit down and talk through that. Is it training? Is it a allocation change within the role that needs to happen to make them enjoy their role more? So that's kind of how it plays on the hiring side. As it pertains to um, other surveys that are out there. So last time I checked, which was like 2 weeks ago, Culture Index has the highest degree of validity that's on the market right now. So what I mean by validity is you can take Culture Index 100 times, and 97% of the time you're going to get the same result back. Um, the other ones out there are not that, the validity is not that high. The other thing that's different about Culture Index is that Culture Index is kind of self-prompted, right? As long as you choose enough words to get a data set, we don't tell you what words to choose. It's 100% on the user to be able to choose kind of what you feel like you are and then what you feel like your position needs, right? That's where it's a little bit different than DISC and Myers-Briggs. Um, Culture Index does a really good job of defining fit within role as well. If any of you guys are familiar with EOS or EO or EOS with Traction or anything like that, when we talk about right person, right seat, the best place to start, and where I think Culture Index does it better than anybody else, is figuring out what that seat is. Like, let's get a really good understanding of what attributes do we need in this seat, and then let's go look for the person to fill that. I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done Predictive Index, I've done DISC. Culture Index is the one that I feel like has given me the best um, thorough understanding of what are my gaps and what are my benefits. To the point, I usually bring this up at the very beginning. I've got a 19-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter, both of which are adorable. They are the apple of my eye. Any boy that wants to date them, they have to take a Culture Index. So, and I've never, like I said, I've been in the people space for 20 years. I wish I would have had Culture Index 20 years ago because I could have helped a lot of people know where they need to be. What is the right seat for them? But then also, I could have known, like, hey, in the world we live in right now with AI, everybody's resume looks like they're a CEO. Everybody's interview skills are top notch because it's gone through an AI filter 20 times. Culture Index helps us know not only the who, but the how, right? And usually the who is more important. I can usually teach the how. I can teach you the skill sets that you need. I can't teach the who. And so that's what Culture Next does better than any other one on the market right now.
Great information and interesting being exposed to Culture Index for some time. We're a boy family, so I never considered that, but I'll mention that to our group next time we talk about.
Yeah.
For those that have daughters, that might be a prerequisite to a date. But anyway, moving forward, because we're getting close on time and we're losing a few people, but we've had a number of people request, and I went through the list you sent me, John. The first up was Jocelyn Moon, and I think we have, I have her survey, so that should be an active.
Okay. Yeah. Let me pull it up real quick.
And actually, she just asked another great question. Jocelyn did. How do you keep people from answering what you think you want or playing the system, what you think you want instead of who they are? We that's a real world question.
Yeah.
After using it for 12 years, we still have that same question. So that might be something you can address, John.
Yeah. So there is, to a degree, of fail-safe built into the system. That's when we were talking about avoidant responses before. So so typically avoidant responses come back if there's not enough words chosen, right? And usually you can tell that because this red arrow, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So this red arrow is hovering between the 0 and 1. So that's usually an indication of like, okay, not a lot of words were chosen. And that's one form of avoidant. The other form of avoidant is if they give answers that don't correspond with each other, right? If they give answers that say they're hyper organized but also hyper chaotic, if there's a lot of answers that don't match, you'll that'll also come up as avoidant as well. Now, the other thing to realize is that culture index, it's not a silver bullet, right? It's a one step of a multi-step process, right? So what I tell people is, okay, the hiring process needs to be a combination of culture index, resume, and interview. Now, when I go into an interview, I can tell to a degree the questions I need to ask, because I look at their patterns and say, okay, like I know this role. Jocelyn, I'll pick on you real quick. So if this role needed somebody that needed to be in an office by themselves for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you applied for that role, one of my questions, probably my first question is going to be like, how do you deal with being by yourself and not having direct communication all the time? And so you ask questions to try and to kind of pull out some of those answers, especially if your pattern is very different from kind of what came over, right? The pattern you're looking for internally within the company is different than what was applied for. Now, to your point, I've read tens of thousands of patterns over the years, and I have had a small handful of people that were able to manipulate the system. But I've never had one where they were able to manipulate the system and I didn't pick it up in the interview, because you can fake the words, but if they don't correspond to what's on the sheet or what you say, there's usually a pretty good indicator there. Did that answer the question?
She can't speak, but I'll
Okay.
assume it does. And let's if we we've got several others. If there's additional interpretation of that one, or shall we move to the next, John?
Oh no, so sorry, we can. I'll not, Jocelyn. We'll do yours real quick. So, Jocelyn, you're naturally a persuader. So where you thrive, and just know that digging into these is usually 15, 20 minutes per survey. So we're going to hit very, very high level. So you're a natural leader, natural visionary. You're somebody that thinks in 3 month blocks, right? When you plan, you tend to plan 1 to 3 months kind of into the future. Highly social, right? So contact list has got to be through the roof. You're a naturally inductive thinker, right? So you gauge very quickly. You can read the room. You almost have ESP when you're meeting people, that you can tell, are they in a good mood, not a good mood. Um, but you are constantly adapting to the environment that's around you. When I look at your C pattern here, which is your pace, you're 2.5 to the left, fast moving, highly adaptable, doesn't want a lot of predictability, but likes some stress to get things done, likes to multitask, likes some excitement in the way things are going. And then when I look at your D trait, which is your conformity trait, it hooks back, right? So you have a decent kind of follow up and follow through, but you are still more big picture, right? You're more big picture when it comes to data. You don't want to necessarily know everything. You just need to know the story that the data is telling you. What you want is, hey, here's what we need to do, X, Y, and Z. Let's go. I don't need to know every little thing of how the watch is made, the material it's made of, or anything like that. When I look at your A-D relationship here, so A is gas pedal, D is brake pedal, right? So you are 2 deviate or 2 centiles heavier on gas, right? So you have an appetite for risk. So there's a certain level of risk that you like, and that you kind of thrive at, right? So, persuaders are naturally great at kind of marketing and sales, right? Persuaders are naturally good at kind of getting into people's heads and understanding what they really want. They're really, really great at selling ideas and concepts. It's not that they're bad at selling like physical things, but where persuaders thrive is selling ideals or softwares or stuff like that. Um, So for the sake of time, I'll just hit kind of those first four dots. Um, any questions, Jocelyn, about those first four?
It might take a minute for her to
Okay.
respond.
No, you're good.
Anyway, let's move to the next one just to get some others. So the next one, or the second that is listed is Cindy or Cynthia Leap, Leap.
Yep. Got it. All right. Cindy is socializer. So this does not mean socializer is what the world thinks socializer is right now. So this is not like somebody that's constantly on YouTube or anything like that. Socializers make amazing therapists, make great listeners. They make great support systems, right? So when I look at your profile, the first thing I notice is your C trait here is the furthest away from your baseline than any other ones, right? So that tells me you have the ability to have long focus, right? Very systematic, methodical focus, right? You can focus on one thing for hours and hours and hours and it not bother you. That is the exact opposite of me, right? If you've got me for 5 minutes, you've won. Whereas for you, you can really focus for long periods of time. There's an intentionality in the way that you use your attention span and stuff like that. When I look at your other dots, your A's the other one that's furthest away, right? So this is your A's 1.5 to the left. So this means you're highly supportive, right? You're self-sacrificial. You want the people around you to be in the spotlight. If you get recognition for something, probably the first thing out of your mouth is, I've got a great team that's here supporting me. And you really want to showcase those people and put those people in the spotlight. Um, Very tactical, right? So you were more focused on like, all right, what needs to happen today, tomorrow, maybe even this week to get things done. Because hey, we'll worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow, we really need to focus on the nuts and bolts of what needs to happen right now. Your B trait is half a trait or half a centile to the left. I would put you in more of an ambivert space where there may be times where you flex over to being more extroverted versus introverted. But you do lean towards being more introverted, where you're leaning towards being um, more a little bit of skepticism or more reserved in the way that you view the world around you. You don't necessarily quickly jump to conclusions. You kind of take a step back and observe kind of what's going on, and then you build your thought processes off that kind of base level of information. With you, your B trait leads your A a little bit. So you do lead with your heart first, and then your brain comes second, which is part of that kind of socializer pattern. Very endearing pattern, very, very, very much a pattern that is there to kind of help and support. When I look at your D pattern, you're half a centile to the left, which again, more big picture than more in the micro when it comes to data, but you're really close to baseline, which means there's probably some flexibility there where you don't necessarily mind jumping into a little bit more of the details than typical. But if you had your choice, you would stay more big picture, right? You naturally somebody that thinks outside the box. You naturally a little bit of a cage rattler where if it's done a certain way, you kind of ask the question occasionally, like, why is it done this way? Is there not a better way that we could do this? Um, and then your AD, your brake does lead your gas by one, which just means you're pretty cautious decision maker, where you're going to take a step back and really gauge kind of what's going on and look and see how is this decision going to impact not only yourself. I'd probably say you probably put yourself last in that, but how is that decision going to impact the group that's around me? And that's what the kind of key is to that social ladder pattern is, kind of where we go one, we go all. And you want everybody to kind of go with you. And so you don't want to make a decision that's necessarily going to hurt the group as a whole. Um, so yeah, that would be, Cindy, kind of what, at least from a high level perspective, kind of what I see as your pattern right now.
Let's maybe see if we can slide two more in, John. The next one is Marlene Lawson,
Is that Marlene?
Marlene.
All right. Marlene, you were a coordinator. So coordinators make amazing project managers. So when we think of coordinators, I want you to think of like the middle hub of a wheel, and everybody else is kind of coming off of that wheel. What coordinators, I'm it's in y'all's name, what you guys do better than anyone else is you coordinate the flow of information between groups. So that's why if you look at your pattern, your B trait is really, really high, right? So when we look at, and I didn't do these for the others just for the sake of time, but for yours, you're what, 4.5 centiles to the right, right? So we're in the 74th, 75th percentile when it comes to sociability, right? So only 25% of the population is more socially engaged and socially driven as you are. So naturally connect with people. Um, your A trait, I'm sorry, your C trait is your other one that's furthest. So your C trait is 2.5 to the left, right? So fast moving, juggling lots of different, in this kind of situation, juggling lots of people and connections, right? As you're connecting people to information, connecting people to process flows, things like that, that is where you thrive. That's what you love doing. Um, your other two, your A trait is 1.5 to the left. Again, this is going to be that hyper supportive, very humble leader where it does not want to be, wants to really celebrate and showcase their team, and really is focused a lot on kind of what's going on right now or maybe in the next couple of weeks. Um, and then your D trait is your conformity, right? So half a centile to the right. So again, you like to dig into the details. You like to rely on, to a degree, historical information to be able to make decisions. And so that's why, you like to plan kind of 1 to 2, maybe 3 weeks into the future, because why plan any further than that? Because I may not have the historical data to be able to make accurate assumptions based off of that. And with this D where it is, yeah, you thrive off accuracy, right? You want every answer, you want every piece of data that comes out of your hands or out of your mouth to be accurate. And when we start getting really far into the future, it's really difficult to give that level of accuracy that you want to have. Now, when I look at your A and B pattern here, I call this the harmony slide. The longer this slide is, the more harmony you bring to an organization, right? So that's a 5 point delta between the two of those. So that's a lot of harmony that you're bringing to an organization by being that coordinator pattern. Um, Now, I do want to bring up your pattern down here, which is your job pattern, which is, if you and I have another conversation off of this, I would ask you what's slowing you down so much, or what's causing you to have to uh, have so many checklists or be very systematic and methodical in the way you're doing things. Um, and that would just be a conversation. And for the record, everybody's patterns have deviations. But if I was sitting down with a client, that would be one of the things I would bring up. Is like, okay, like what's going on here? And then when I look at your AD, very similar to Cindy, 2 centile difference between brake and gas. So again, I'd still put you. We're stepping into a little bit of risk aversion now, where again, the focus for you is on the group, not the individual. So you're making decisions based off the collective, right? How is this going to affect the people around me? Well, no, that's my family, the team, my clients, whatever it may be. And so that's causing you a little bit of pause to say, okay, I need to take a step back, get a little bit more information before I can make that next decision.
John, let's do one more.
Okay.
I think we still have time. And the next one was Sarah, Saraa, Sarah Donnell.
All right. So influencer, very similar to a socializer. The big difference between a socializer and influencer is going to be the pace. Um, so influencers, again, not what we think of as like YouTube influencers. Well, I mean, I guess they could be good at it, but that's not what we mean by influencers. What we mean by influencers here are influencers tend to be people that are great at driving thought processes or driving ideals or driving intellectual pursuits in a certain direction, right? They tend to be good um, implementers, coaches, um, leadership developers. You tend to see a lot of influencers in like leadership and development place because what they're trying to do is take a skill set and help the people that are there really understand it and want to do it because it's attractive and it's value added, right? So that's what influencers bring more than anybody else. So obviously, number one trait for you is going to be your sociability, right? So you were three, right? Three to the right. So we are definitely socially driven. deductive in the way that we view things, right? So very easy for you to pick up on cues. If you're trying to influence somebody to do X, Y, and Z, or if you're trying to steer a conversation, it's almost like a sixth sense for you to be able to see, like, all right, this conversation is not going the way I want to. I need to do X, Y, and Z to steer it in the direction I want it to go. So low level of like social awareness and social strategy around that. Your other three are all one centile to the left, right? Autonomy, again, more on that support side, but getting close to that baseline where there may be times, and if you even look at your job profile, you are stepping over into being more of a visionary and more driven and more of a goal setter and goal achiever. More tip of the spear in your job, whereas individually, you see yourself as more of a support, right? And we see that also in that harmony drive or that harmony slide there. Again, 4-point slide for that, right? Bringing lots of harmony to an organization, bringing lots of harmony to your clients. Oh, I didn't even see you're coach and facilitator. So yeah, if you have a client that you're trying to get them to do something and they're disagreeing a lot, it's very easy for you to guide that conversation to make it applicable to them where they start to understand it. This, your C trait, again, one to the left, fast moving, but close to the baseline. So there may be times where you have to dip over into being more systematic, methodical, checklist oriented. You see that in your role as well. And then your D trait, which is going to be the conformity side of it, doesn't surprise me that you're a coach or facilitator because dealing with different groups that you're coaching, all of them are different and they all have very individual problems. And so having that D to the left is going to help you adapt and think outside the box when you're dealing with a wide variety of people that you're having to coach. And you see that even further in your job, right? Look how far that D trait moves all the way over to the left, right? So in your job, you're even doing it more, right? You're even more out of the box. You're dealing with clients that have issues that are not very replicated, and so you're constantly have to think very in the gray of kind of solutions of how to get them back on track. Your AD, you are AD stacked, which again, I would just make sure that you have a system in place that when you do get stuck, right? If there's a risk and you don't know if you need to take it or not, you're kind of stuttering a little bit, I would have some type of checks and balances in place there to let me know, okay, here's, I'm okay to take the risk or I'm not okay to take the risk. If you have a team, or you're looking to start a team, I would look at, okay, in the future, that next hire may be either somebody that's going to be risk adverse or risk assuming, right? Now when I look in your role, that's a lot of risk, right? That's a 6-point delta from your gas pedal to your brake pedal, right? So in your role, that's a lot of risk, right? And so that would be a conversation where if we were to sit down and be like, okay, like walk me through this risk. Like what is it? Are there things we can put in place to make it a little bit more manageable or a little bit more comfortable for you to kind of sit in those risks and do those things? Yeah, yeah, influencers are fun. One of the most outgoing patterns out there.
Well, great, John. Thank you very much. Two comments. One for Marlene Lawson. There's a couple questions in the chat. John, after the program, if you just monitor chat and you can respond to her directly, that'd be great. Shital had a question which you addressed. Maybe just a closing comment. The difference between the upper and lower graph, the survey
Yep.
traits and the job behaviors.
Yeah, yeah. And so typically, if we were going through the full Culture Index training, we would have gone through this a little bit more. So this top graph, this survey trait, this is who you are at your core, right? So if you are not having to flex or adapt for anything, this is who you are. Think of this as your kind of personality fingerprint, right? Or your personality DNA. This is who you are if you're not being pulled or stretched in any different way. The bottom one is how you feel like you have to show up to be successful at work. Um, and so, if you were in an organization and we were going through this, right, I would compare the top and bottom and look for any deltas between the two of them, right? And what I'm looking for is anytime these dots switch sides. And if they do, like, let's talk about those. But what I don't want people to get too hung up on is if they do flip sides, all of a sudden that means I'm just not the right fit or something like that. That's not the case at all. What we want to look at is how do we alleviate some of these sharp edges, right? Um, I'll pick on Sarah real quick. Like, how do we alleviate that reliance on systems and methods, or can we make it where it's moves a little bit quicker to more match kind of what Sarah's natural tendencies are, which are kind of fast moving, multitasking, and stuff like that.
Well, I tell you, I'm excited. There's a wealth of information, and having gone through the 16-hour training, and a lot of our folks have done it as well. There's even more to the story. I think I could almost say John has only teased a lot of you folks because there's a lot of great questions about the EU and the LNI, and it's just additional information that John can provide to you directly. In closing, I'd like to throw it. I'm going to take the screen, John,
Okay.
and I'd like just to throw this one screen. John, thank you so much for presenting. I have a feeling we held, I think, 38 people on for the entire hour and a half. Went up to 56 people, I believe it was. Very interesting subject matter. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't ask again. Thank you all for attending, and if I could just show this closing slide, that would be great. Thanks, and have a
Yeah, yeah.
great day.
Let me pull it up real quick if I can find it.
Before we wrap up, I want to take just 1 minute to say thank you for joining us today. We know your time is valuable, and we're honored you chose SCORE to help you grow your business. Now, SCORE has always offered these webinars free of charge. But here's the reality. Due to changes in federal funding, some of our support has been delayed or cut. And while we're committed to keeping these programs free, we need your help to do it. Think of it like this. If today's webinar gave you real value, maybe leave us a little tip, the way you would for a waitress who gave great service. Or maybe you want to give forward to the next entrepreneur to benefit just like you did. We're only asking if it's within your means. Not, you just keep learning and growing with us. You can give $5, $10, $25, whatever feels right will be directly helping us keep these webinars free for everyone. There's a secure link in the chat. It takes less than a minute to make a difference. Thank you again for being here, for your energy, and for supporting SCORE's mission to help entrepreneurs thrive.
Thanks again, all attendees. Y'all have a great day. John, I'll give a call.
All right. Thanks, sir. You guys have a good one.